My name's Jeff Johnson. I'm going to be going through the presentation. I'm going to be going through just a couple of slides just to give you, as Dave said, just a little bit of background about who Kudos Solutions are, what we do as a company, and then again, I'm going to go and sort of demonstrate the two modules of Preactor that we're going to look at today, which is the planning module, which is Preactor AP, and the scheduling module, which is Preactor AS. And again, I'm going to do a live demonstration of each one, so I'll get part of the way through the slides, and then I'll drop out the slide deck, and I'll go straight into the live product. So, as they say, without further ado, I shall sort of move on. So what we've got here, so an agenda, like you say, just a brief introduction of Kudos and who we are, how long we've been doing this. Again, our expertise, so where our specialisation is within the sort of Preactor community, and then just a very sort of brief overview about what we see the difference between planning and scheduling, and how it's termed within Preactor as well. So there's a clear differentiator between what we would class as planning and what we would class as scheduling. And then again, as we can see there, we've got a live demonstration of the planning tool and then the scheduling tool, and then we've saved a little bit of time at the end for any questions if there are any. Okay, so a quick sort of timeline on Kudos Solutions. Kudos Solutions sort of founded 1990. We became a Preactor reseller in 1994, and so we were one of the first Preactor resellers, as that was sort of product as it was introduced then. And we've been doing and working with Preactor since 1994, and Preactor is all we do. So we don't sell any other products. We do work around Preactor, hence the reason of the relationship with Dave and Achieva is that is how we sort of set up our business. Again, we're the tier 1 reseller of Preactor in the UK, and as we can see from there, we've had success over the last few years of actually sort of planning and customer retention as well. Preactor as a tool is a global product. It's in, I think it's about 35 languages. It's sold all over the world. Its install base isn't just a UK product. It was primarily there to start with, but it has grown all over the world. You've got more than 5,000 companies use it around the world in sort of every different sector of sort of manufacturing. And I think since the product was purchased by Siemens in June 2013, there'd been over 10,000 licenses sold. So it's a product with a big footprint and a big footprint globally as well. Again, just a few of our customers, and like I say, our experience is primarily there in the FMCG sector, so the fast-moving consumer goods, and we've got companies there who make and produce perishable goods, perishable products, so shelf life is important to them. It might not be for every type of business, but the principle is that from a scheduling point of view, they have to react and have to be able to replan quickly and react to changing demand, product life, and taking all these considerations, things into consideration when they're scheduling. They're finding Preactor is the ideal tool to do this. Okay, so without teaching people how to suck eggs, hopefully on the call, is what the difference then we see between planning and scheduling within Preactor. What we're saying is planning is what to make and when to make it, how much to make it, and where. So we're sort of we're looking at a high level calculation from a planning perspective. We're making it in bucket based calculation rather than it being a finite. So buckets being, we're going to make it this week, I want to make it, or today I want to make it, rather than saying at 5 o'clock in the afternoon I'm going to be scheduling this product. And that's where we see the difference between planning and scheduling. Scheduling is we're looking at the sequence of a line, so the running order. We're looking at minimizing changeovers, and then we're looking at additional constraints, as we can see there. So the priorities within a line, within a day, within a bucket. And so we're doing that sort of process flow. And again, we can look at there as constraints sort of, people and sort of tooling, labor, etc., and process delays between operational sequences. So there's a key differentiator there between what we see as planning and what we see as scheduling. And again, as I go through the product, we'll be able to see then how those differences then equate to what the results are that it's giving us. Okay, so just a very brief overview of what I'm going to go through in the planning demonstration. I'm going to go through how Preactor picks up the data, where the information comes from, what it will need to drive it. So opening stock information, product demand, and product parameters that allow us to do the calculation. We're also then going to show how the MPS, so the master production schedule of how much you need to make in each bucket, is calculated, how that's automatically done. We're going to be able to see that against a rough cut capacity planning, which again is based on the bucket size, and then how our demand is going to change against the existing plan and what effect that has on the plan that we may be committed yesterday, last week, the day before, whatever the planning cycle is. But we're going to look at how Preactor is able to see that from a planning by exception process. And also we're going to be able to look at any at-risk stock we can see within the board. So I'm just going to show you how the standard processes we've got in Preactor are able to work through these different sort of cycles, what we see as the planner's sort of daily cycles they're going through. So I'm going to drop out of the slideshow presentation now and drop directly into the live product and walk through it that way. So hopefully you can all see the Preactor screen now. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at the main workspace of Preactor, the opening workspace. So Preactor is a Microsoft certified product, so it follows the same layout as products such as Outlook, Dynamics CRM, etc., with the menus on the left-hand side and the navigation on the right-hand side. So as we change between the tables, if I go to maintain database, the table will appear on the right-hand side if I've not got any actions to perform at that stage. The data that Preactor uses to process itself can all be imported. Again, Preactor is designed to be linked and interfaced to another system. Again, hence the conversation that Dave was talking about earlier, as Preactor being a sort of a bolt-on, an addition to SAP Business One, because Preactor is designed to work in that way. So it's designed to be fed from something else. And again, the calculation is then run within Preactor to allow us to look at the implications. So it's doing the calculation on that data. So all the information that I'm going to use for planning in Preactor in here in a moment is all assumed to either be imported. You can adjust it manually in here, but it's still designed to be imported in. I'm just going to show briefly as well that we've got our transactional data, so we have stock information. We can have multiple stock batches for the same product code. Again, if life is a consideration, we can have an out-of-life date, so we could look at out-of-life stock, at-risk stock, etc. We can have forecast sales information, and we come up with what Preactor classes as non-aggregated demand. So our demand is based upon a mixture of both forecast and sales information. So we can have those multiple demands in multiple buckets as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go into the main planning tool itself. If I go to Workspace, Generate Plan. So first of all, when we first go into Preactor, what we're seeing is we get a view in a grid form of our results. So this is an old plan I opened sort of yesterday, so I'm just going to go through and sort of walk through how I create a new plan. So every row in this plan represents a different bucket. and if I go to my settings, set planning horizon, I've used a custom date here, so I've defaulted the date. But I'm going to plan in days in this instance. And I'm going to plan for 28 days in buckets. I can plan in weeks as well. So I can say I want to plan in days, then weeks. So you can run a combination of the two within the process. But in this instance, I'm just going to plan in days only. I'm going to run through, so I'm going to create myself a new plan as I go through. And what it's going to say, so first of all, the process has created me a new plan with just empty buckets. So it's not imported me any of my stock I've got no demand. I'm then able to calculate my stock. And what it's starting to do now, it's showing my opening stock position, my demand, and then what type of demand it is, whether it's an order or a forecast, and then what I'm going to close with, because at the moment I've not calculated any MPS figures, any master production schedule, and I'm going to close with 36 because I'm making 44. Now, when Preactor looks at what levels we're trying to calculate up to, it uses a concept called days of cover. So it's saying our minimum target here is 2 days, and our target days are 5. So the ideal process within Preactor in here is to say, well, actually, when I fall below, my closing stock falls below my minimum, I'm going to try and calculate up to my target. And this is a dynamic numeric calculation, so it allows us to say every time I look at a bucket, I'm going to say 2 days worth of my minimum holding is actually the following 2 days worth of demand. Hence the reason we get this variable minimum and target stock over time. And this allows us to hold enough stock to cover 2 days worth of volume, but it doesn't mean we have to maintain these numbers manually. So I'm going to now run my MPS calculation here to work out how much I need to make in each bucket. So if I run my calculate MPS, what the process has now done, it's now said I've got 80 as my opening, as we saw. I've got a demand of 44. I'm asking the system's going to tell me to make 105, and that means I'm going to close with 141, which is slightly below my target, but the reason being that I've got a reorder multiple here on this product of 5, and it will allow it then to say, well, actually, if I made 110, it would take me over my target. So as we go through here, so I've got multiple records. I've got 28 days worth of buckets here for this item. If I right-click on this here and go to my chart options, I can see that graphically. I'm just going to drag this down so we can see it in the top window here. So we're now seeing this same item code graphically, with the top of the yellow bar, the graph being the minimum stock holding, the top of the blue bar being the target stock holding, the red bars being the forecast, and the top of the green bar being the order demand. We can then also see MPS values here as the blue bars on the screen, and this is my projected stock position, is this line here. So as well as getting that graphically, the user is able to interact with this as well, so we can drag that down and around, and as I drop that to 70, we can see this has actually changed my MPS. So the user is actually able to interact with the MPS values through the graph. I can also interact with them directly through the grid as I run them through, and it also calculates that process going forward. But as you can see there, it does allow me to take this into a negative position here. To prevent this happening, there is an option within Preactor to do an automatic MPS update calculation. So if I select this one and I now drag the bars and drop that there, Preactor is going to calculate going forwards how much I need to make. So the idea being the planner is able to make manual choices, and Preactor will react accordingly in the subsequent buckets to try and maintain that item within the stock profile. Okay, so if I just switch that off, I'm just going to recalculate this again. We've got different modes within Preactor. I'm just going to close that down. We've got different modes within Preactor when we're planning. And in this instance, if I right click and I go to my planning resource. We can run it in an infinite capacity mode, a constrain mode, a move then constrain, and a constrain then move. But what I'm just going to do is, at the moment, I've run this in an infinite capacity. So what we're seeing in here is every bar on this graph represents an MPS value in the chart. So if I was to key in 250 into here, we can see we get a reaction here at the bottom, and as I drag, I can adjust the volume in this graph as well. I can try and manually level it if I want to. So I've got the ability to interact with the plan on this level as well to try and smooth it out. But in reality, what we're able to do is to say, well, actually, I want to run this in a constrain mode. I'm going to do my same MPS calculation again. And when this runs through and finishes, there we go. So what Preactor's now done, it's now said, I've said in this example, I've got 16 hours on my packing line, and this is the capacity that I've got to work with. And within that process, Preactor's now done the same MPS calculation over the entire set of orders and said, well, this is how much of each product you can now make in each bucket. And again, we're able to run through different modes. So in this one here, I'm constraining it down to a single line. But what we're also able to do is run what we would class as a move then constrain. And if I run that calculation again, what this then does, I right click and show my multiple planning resource chart. Again, I'm just going to drop this one on the top here to make it easier to see. It's now able to spread the load over 3 different lines. So if I've got a second, so here I've got a packing 1, 2, and 3. So I've got 3 choices where I can make something. It's able to spread the load over those lines. And the idea being that Preactor is able to move work around the factory or just load on a primary planning resource. But again, it's a rough cut capacity answer. It's not looking to say this is a finite result, because that's what we're going to look at in the scheduling tool, the AS tool, in a moment. It's a rough cut capacity plan that tells me you should be able to achieve this much on the given work centres that you've told Preactor about. I close that down. Obviously, from a planner's perspective, I'm just going to run this back in an infinite capacity mode. From a planner's point of view, we might want to look at then the changes that might happen to the plan day to day. So as well as us having the MPS calculation done, if the forecast, if our forecast values were to change, so if I change this one to 65, as I hit enter there, what it's able to do, it's able to react to all the subsequent buckets and now shows me what any changes I've got against my stock position. So the idea being that we can retain a plan that we had to start with, re-import any new demand, and then really we're starting to look to plan by exception. And the way we're able to see that in Preactor is if I go to my view alerts, we've got a set of alert windows that we can open up and we can run through, and we can then say to Preactor, all I want to know is anything where I'm below target, I'm above target, below the min, and we can set all these measures ourselves. Again, I'm a little conscious about sort of how much time we've got, but we are able to sort of set these measures. And the idea being that we can filter this table down and show me only where I'm below my minimum, show me those records. And then as the user goes through, we can say, well, actually, I only want to know for the first few days where I'm below the target. So here we've got 3 where I'm below the minimum. If I then look at these records here, I'm thinking, well, there's one there for the first or the third. And if I click on it, Preactor will navigate to that record for me as I go through. And I think, well, I can add in, I'm going to make 25 more on that day. And then what we're doing from that point, the alerts windows have automatically been filtered down to take those things out. So Preactor is dynamically working through that for you. So the planner can plan by exception rather than have to search for all the results themselves. Again, it might not be relevant for everybody, but you've also got the ability to look at, filter down and look at individual products. And again, if you've got any out of life products, again, our experiences with tends to be with sort of food and beverage companies where obviously they have short shelf life products within the day. And again, we have an out of life calculation here. So in this example, I've got 78 in stock. I've got only 21, demand for 21 of that stock, and I know that this batch is going to go out of life in 2 days' time. But if our forecast value was to increase, what we see is the out of life total is reducing because I'm consuming more of that stock. And again, we have the same ability on production. If the reorder multiples are very high, but the demand is very low, what that does, that forces to show us when we've got out of life production as well as out of life stock. So we're able to sort of put these alerts in, but the idea being that Preactor has a capacity constrained calculation tool it can run within itself, but then it also allows the user to override any of the answers that are seen, but making it easy for the user to find the results that they're looking for. And one last thing before we move back into the slides and then onto the scheduling product. At the end of each day for each individual item, at the end of each bucket, we get a value of how long that closing stock is expected to last. So if we're looking from a planning perspective to say, well, what is the product I've got the least at, or what is my most at-risk product which has got the lowest stock holding based on my demand going forward, rather than have to search for a number and understand that, Preactor has got the ability to say this is how many days cover you're going to have at the end of each bucket. And again, looking forward, that can say to you on that day here, we've actually got 10 days cover or 11 days or 4.5, depending on where we are. So again, the idea is that the planner can plan by exception. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that was a very whistle-stop tour, obviously, of the planning of AP. I'm going to quickly flick back to the presentation, and I'll open up the scheduling tool at the same time. I'll just go back to the slideshow here. So in this instance, what I'm going to do, again, I'm just going to pause this to reopen the slideshow. I'm going to go through the AS configuration, as it's classed in Preactor, and I'm going to go through how the infinite capacity calculation works. I'm also going to go through how we're able to interact with that answer, what the scheduling options are, sequence dependent changeovers, again, within lines, and also I'm going to be able to walk through our secondary constraints and how Preactor uses those and how you can set them up. We've got, again, just a quick overview of material availability within Preactor and also what-if scheduling, so how we can do what-if scenarios in our scheduling. Okay, so I'm going to go back through and resume and switch back onto the scheduling side. So hopefully you can all see the scheduling side of things now within Preactor. So again, the layout is exactly the same. We've got the navigation down the left-hand side, but again, this time when we go into the sequencer, as that loads up, it's more of a traditional electronic Gantt chart from a scheduling perspective. So we have time running across the top here and our work centers down the left-hand side. We've got areas in white here, which is the available time on a line, and we've got some areas in grey here and yellow, which show to us the different shift patterns that we can have on the lines. And here at the bottom, we've got our unscheduled operations that allow us to see all the orders, all the MPS values that we created in Preactor AP. We've now got those in the Preactor AS, and we're going to go through now and see how we load them onto the board. But remember, when we're looking at this in finite mode, not a rough cut capacity mode now. So I'm just going to load on, first of all, I'm just going to load on my finished products. And when it runs through here. So what we're seeing is, again, I've got 3 packing lines again, the same as I had in the AP demonstration. But this time, I'm actually running across a finite resource. Each one of these coloured blocks then represents an operation within the schedule. I can click and drag and interact with these. If I take it to a work centre where I've got no routing information for it, it gives me the little no entry sign. As I drag between the work centres, you can see the jobs getting longer and shorter depending on the run rate that we've got assigned to the line. So we can have different run rates for different lines for different products. We can see here as well that we gain a gap on the line. And what we're seeing here is we've got a secondary constraint against these three lines that tell me that I've only got a certain number of people that can run these lines at any one time. So as I drag and drop, if I think, well, I can put a job into that gap because that easily fits there, as I drop that, we get a message appear to say, I've actually broken one of my secondary constraints. Do I want to continue? Yes, I do. Do we want to undo? No, we don't. So we can break those secondary constraints by manually overriding them, but they're there as a guide for Preactor to say, well, actually, I don't want you to use more than 21 people within this period of time. And we can also see that graphically. So if I go back to my plots window and open that up, I'm just going to zoom in on this scale here and drag it at the top again. So I can choose my sort of screen layout within Preactor. And what we're seeing in here, let's click down one here. Just redraw this. So what we're seeing here is I'm saying I've got a minimum of 0, a maximum of 21 people as my secondary constraint. If I drag and drop this job, I'm going to put it back where Preactor wanted it to be in the first place. We can see the chart up here reacts at the same time. So we're able to see what changes we're making. Again, if I drop it here, we can see how Preactor is counting that. If I do want to do, yes, I do. You can set these constraints up as a constraint or just a counter. So if the question was, how much labour do I need to run my lines, you can disable this constraint as it's classed in Preactor and then rerun the same process again. Okay, I'm going to now look at loading the rest of the processes that I've got within Preactor. So I've still got some unscheduled operations down here at the bottom. This is my last process of my operation. If I run all my pre-processes, we'll see that we have some different sort of scheduling options within Preactor to run through. So here I'm just going to run through the process, and we can see here we've got these yellow jobs follow a critical path through the process. So there's an operation here in the packing lines. We've then got, they have to go through these ovens, but it's a batch process in the ovens, and then they'll also go through a mixer and then a prep station. But there's a critical path here in the process, and also that you have a relationship between these operational stages, and it's using the operational relationship based on the bill of materials. So we create a logic within that bill of materials. So if I have a look in my Material Explorer, we can see we have a one-to-many, and we can have a many-to-one relationship. So if I drill into this one and go back to this one here, we can have a one-to-many and a many-to-one relationship within Preactor. So we're looking at consuming and producing processes within the sequencer, and also the dependencies when we're creating a schedule are based on those things. Okay, we can look at running things in, like we say, an infinite capacity that's based on a batch size and the fact we're allowed to put multiple products in the same oven at the same time, or it can be based on a finite capacity, the fact we have to make one job after another. We've got an area here at the bottom again. I'm just zooming in down to here. We're looking at here, zooming in, where we have sequence-dependent changeovers. So as I drag and drop, again, I'm interacting with the operation. So if we drag and drop, as I'm dragging the job around here, we see the black bar at the front of the job appearing and disappearing. And the black bar at the front of the job represents the setup time within Preactor. And again, what we're able to do is within Preactor is to schedule using that process. So we're looking at trying to minimize our changeovers within Preactor. And how Preactor is doing this, we're saying we've got a secondary constraint here that I've got one team that covers these two lines. So we're able to line hop. So each time I require a setup on a job, I'm switching over to another station. And then vice versa, as soon as I need to set up to the next job, I'm switching back across. So it's effectively line hopping through the process. We've also got the ability to feed batch a sync one-to-many relationship. Again, here, if I just quickly go into Material Explorer, we've got one batch here, which is being consumed by multiple processes, and we're able to feed that through batches throughout the process stage. So we can see here, we've got a grading station here, goes into mixers, and we're able to drop these batches through. But the idea being is that we can control the logic that Preactor uses to schedule. So we can define those processes, and they don't all have to be the same. It's not a one-fits-all logic within Preactor. It's a multi-pass scheduling rule within Preactor. It's a single, we can pick on locations, whether it be the packing lines, whether it be the ovens, whether it be the mixing stations or the preps, that run in a different way to each other, but Preactor is able to build up that logic. I mentioned briefly the material availability as well. So up here we have a supply and demand, supply records, and at the bottom we have our demand records. So at the bottom here are all the demand details for all the orders we've got for maybe the operations on the board, and at the top we have our stock, or we might have raw material information for a particular product. And if I just click on this job here, what we're able to see here is we can make the dependency of an operation be based on more than volume that's being made on the board. So we can say, well, actually, you can't schedule this operation until you've got the material available for it. So the process is out, you're able to build in that process to say, this operation here requires some film to be making itself, and that film isn't available until 12 o'clock. And Preactor will not allow that operation naturally. If I drag that forward, we can see the operation's gone green at the top of the job. As I take it out, that green bar disappears. But Preactor will not allow that operation to be scheduled before that material is available. The user is able to override that, as we've just seen there from dragging and dropping, but that Preactor is staying within the rules and within the constraints. But you're able to select materials that are available. You can specify materials which aren't required to be pegged against. So be selective over the data we pull in. And then, again, very briefly, as we look at the process within the board, we're able to open and save different data sets. So here I've got a schedule for the full week. I've got one against old interface data for pulling information. I've got a test copy. But the idea being is that you can save off multiple scenarios within Preactor and can compare them against themselves. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create, I'm going to save this schedule. I'm going to move this job from this line down to here. And I'm going to, no I don't. I'm going to leave that job on that line. I'm going to save schedule as. So I've saved that schedule in a different order. And what I'm now going to do, I'm now going to look at undoing that process. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to compare my two schedules against each other. So I can either go back and I can reopen a different schedule. So I'll say, well, actually, I'm going to go back. I'm going to start again. I'm going to run that process and run the next process as well. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to do a comparison between the two. So I can go to my trace window here. I'm just going to change the axes that it displays on, because we can trace by order number, or we can trace by, I'm just going to trace by resource here because it's easy to see. And again, I'm going to look down here at this packing line, because this is the only one I changed. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to open a comparative file. And if I scroll down to the bottom, what I then see is, I'm just going to zoom in so it's a little bit easier to see. So what we now see is we've got the packing line has actually got 2 lines drawn against it, and we can see the running order of the 2 lines. So I don't know whether you can see that on your screens, but there's a slight green tinge to the back of the resource detail. And then here we're seeing I've got my second schedule, so I'm saying it's at the top here, it's schedule versus my test copy. And here I've got a gap on my test copy line where I move this product across. So we can do a comparison between the 2 schedules and then make a decision over which one we want to go with. And the decision may well be based on, well, what was the utilization of each schedule. So what we're able to do, we can look at data in utilization mode. And again, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to change my bucket settings. So again, excuse me while I just lay my screen out because it makes it a bit easier to see. And again, I'm just going to scroll down the window at the top. So here I've got my finished product line and my 3 packing lines here at the top. And this represents the 3 packing lines here. And this is done in an 8-hour window. And what it's saying in here is that my packing line is 95% utilized for this first half of the shift, with 5% being change over time. If I click on it, it gives me that information, and I've got 0 time idle. But if I was to drag and drop one of the jobs out of that line and drop it there, what we then see is that my packing line efficiency is now changed. And we can see I'm only 75% utilized, with, again, less than 5% being, and I'm 20% idle. And Preactor is going to do this calculation as you run through. So again, if we were to drag and drop and readjust, I'm going to break obviously a few secondary constraints. But as I'm doing that, it's showing me my line efficiency. But it's also showing me for the group as well. So again, if I just undo, we've still got 23% of the group, which is unavailable time, which is obviously these spaces here in this first 8-hour period. So the idea being is that Preactor is trying to give us the ability to measure our utilization on a line and to see that dynamically as we're dragging around as well. And again, the same with the planning tool, that Preactor is designed to be an interactive answer. So Preactor will give you a schedule based on the criteria you give it, and then allow you to interact with that result going forward. Okay, if I just go back to our presentation now. Okay, so the way that we work at Kudos is that I suppose we understand that you know your scheduling problem, your problems better than we do. So with Preactor, we're looking with a tool that enables us to give you the clarity over what that problem is, and then how best can we solve it with Preactor. So we're always happy to work with people to understand how they're doing and what the difficulties are, rather than you coming in with a solution and saying this is how it has to work. Preactor is designed to be tailored to the actual problems that you've got from a scheduling point of view. Okay, so thank you very much for listening, if there's anybody still listening. And I think, Dave, are you?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeff. I think, I think you're right there. I mean, not all companies are the same, and I think that's the power of this is that it is a best of breed product, and that's why we put it on the top of SAP Business One, because there's no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. I think it's sort of flexible, it's powerful. The rules in it are very good and sort of out of the box. If it's set up correctly, and you take the approach of actually designing it to solve the scheduling problems within a business, then you get a very good result, out of the box. But given the the planners the ability to have that manual interaction and move things around. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's that's what they want to see. So I think that's all software-wise we were going to show today. We can open it up for questions. So if anybody has any questions, then please feel free to ask them now. Our email addresses are on that sort of final slide there, so we'd be happy to take questions via email as well if you would like. But if anybody's got any questions, then yeah, sure, fire them in, and now we'd be happy to answer. Oh, you've done a good job, Jeff.
I'm going to say that's either a good sign or a bad sign, Dave, isn't it? When either nobody's got any questions. I've either told them everything or everybody's asleep. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I think if you have got questions, then obviously you've got our contact details. Just email us in, and we'll do our best to advise you or at least point you in the right direction. So thanks very much for joining the session today, guys. Much appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, bye-bye.